Hey, so I'm gonna try to be the Lorax of food for the next couple of minutes. I'm gonna try to say what food has been trying to tell us for ever since we've been ingesting it, really. So we know food to be as like a form of messenger and as a form of communication. So what food is doing is acting much more than a form of nourishment. It's acting as like means of communication almost. And this is done indirectly, sometimes even subconsciously. And it's almost being told through osmosis, really. But when we're eating food, we're ingesting much more than the nutrients it provides us, but we're also ingesting that being the culture, the history, the energy. Energy being told as more the path it took to get there. Yesterday, I was able to take a watermelon over to a friend's house for a function. A watermelon. And the way I like to think of it is just I'm not just primarily taking a watermelon, but I'm putting something on a table and calling it ours. I'm bringing this act of sharing. And the mere act of cutting the watermelon is a social event within itself. And what I'm trying to mean by this is that food can make us feel more than satiety, or the absence of it can make us feel more than hunger. Food is also trying to tell us that in a way, it's a form of celebrating. One of my previous managers, he likes the term hosting souls, which is really what we're doing. At least my job as a server in like that really touristy part of the city is that our job is to make experiences much more memorable. Food itself is a form of a milestone. You know, even when we're thinking about it or when we're not, the mere act of getting to the middle of the day and having lunch is a milestone within itself. This includes breakfast and dinner. You know, for breakfast, we woke up. It's, hey, we made it to a new day. Let's break this fast. Or dinner, when you're simply just celebrating that you made it through the day. Another example of this would be like birthday cakes. Almost every culture has their own way of celebrating, this being birthdays, weddings, anniversaries, graduations. And as a server, we get to witness these core moments. And we're able to call ourselves part of the architecture that kind of molds these things together. The ability to help others create memories. The couple celebrating an anniversary will ultimately remember who attended them, where they sat. Just even like the mere act of reading a table can tell us a whole lot about a person. Each table would be telling their own story, whether this is through sharing a meal, the food that's left behind, or the empty plate in itself. It's also really important to read mood through these food and drink choices. So even when we're eating, whether we notice it or not, the mere act of choosing to drink water over alcohol can tell us more about ourselves. Just a mere act of reflecting on it too. Like a table sharing wine will have a different tempo than one that I'm serving shots to. I think it's important to think about the last time we sat on a table with people we cared about and to think of what was on that table. You know, were we celebrating a birthday? Were we celebrating anything special? Or was it just some snacks? These hold a reflection into what the mood and the environment we're in, sort of creating this atmosphere. Most of the time, I'm interacting with people from other parts of the world. And I feel like they view the world with such intrigue and curiosity that it's oftentimes inspiring. I work in a Mexican restaurant. So there's people who ask me how to eat things. And sure, I mentioned, yeah, you can make a taco or maybe like a burrito. And it's really cool when I tell them like you can just easily tear it apart and just kind of like pinch it and scoop it and you can just eat it like that. There's no really right or wrong way of eating things. But that's primarily because it's important to view ourselves in their position and view the world with such curiosity. You know, I feel like if I were to travel to a different part of the world, then I would hold that same curiosity and would like someone to show me certain methods. You know, we can contrast this to a person that goes into that Mexican restaurant and just orders a cheeseburger. And one thing I've learned as a server is that the brightest table is most of the time the one most open to that curiosity. The act that food has no rules. I would argue that does have some unspoken ones for sure. So growing up, my mom had kind of had this like unspoken rule where we weren't able to get mad after we had just eaten like an avocado. Like it would be detrimental to our health if we did. And I thought this to be true. And so did my siblings. My younger one, in fact, brought it up at a dinner with our extended family. And while we were trying to get on his nerves, he was like, hey, no me hagan enojar porque estoy comiendo aguacate. And everyone started bursting laughing. At the time, I couldn't quite like register myself because it's like, hey, like, homie's on to something. But this was just one of those cases where parents make up some of these rules to kind of, in a sense, control our tempers. Now I see it as more of a like a parental thing, creating these rules. But these rules can also be carried out through like culture. And this would be applying to homes, to restaurants, or just in general any form of dining space or any place where you can sit down and eat with others. Food is also trying to tell us that it's in a way a form of love language. Most of the things are gonna be flavored with what I like to think of as care. I remember growing up, I my mom would force us to eat lentils before we got the chance to do anything fun. Her her task was to make us eat these lentils. And while it's something that I grew up kind of despising, the more I grew older, the more comfort I found in that. And I would argue that it still fills me with plenty of intrigue because that was her own way of caring for us and providing us with the nutrients she thought we needed, filling me with further curiosity on how she came up with these conclusions. You know, what was the science at the time? Who was the person that brought this idea upon her? You know, as someone with no formal education, I think it's really interesting to view how she viewed the world at the time. Now, growing older, I view this more as a comfort food now. And now, every time I'm able to visit my parents, I feel like it's one of the things that I look forward to the most. Because through this plate, I was able to learn about care. Food preparation in itself is another thing. A mise en place, or it can be more than just a technique, but a philosophy. You know, things like cooking can teach us patience. A mise en place can show us, you know, to be more organized in general and to be more mindful of not just the consumption of food, but the preparation of it in itself. It's also how we set a table. It's also how we prepare others to join us. And it's really about the preparation and intention that food teaches us. It's also really important to view food as maybe like a form of vulnerability, where for most of my birthdays, the only thing I ask for is my mom's birria, which is one of the things I look forward to the most. And it means a lot to me because I know that this dish is made with care. And it also makes me wonder who taught her how to prepare this dish. You know, like what was it that she allowed her to be put in a position where she introduced it to us? And I think that's really meaningful within itself. You know, this can be my grandmother's passed down dish. This could be my great 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 grandmother's passed down dish, just modified to their own liking. And it's also important to note that food can also tell us an era or a period of time where we live in. One example I can think of is I was working in a restaurant where they made a shakshuka plate. You know, I tried to replicate this myself, which is another thing to note because through modifying things in your own way, you're also learning that there's no set rules when it comes to food. So I would make it at home. I would talk to guests about it often, saying that it was the first plate that I tried in this spot and then I still try to make it at home. But food can also take us back to a whole different time period within itself. For instance, when I'm trying this dish, it's almost taking me back to that summer where I worked in that particular joint. I'm thinking of the Ratatouille part where he just gets taken back to his childhood, and that's exactly pretty much it. So, like, through passed down recipes, through that birria that my mom made, I'm sure I'm being taken back to like my birthday. But through that same dish, my mom is probably taking back to the time where she first tried it, the time where she first might have learned it with my grandmother. So I'm trying multiple periods of time, I'll say. This is also teaching us that we don't have to learn, we don't have to follow everything word for word. We can use what we learn as an influence. I have a friend who likes to make music, and he would always say that, music is original, music is just a remix of other songs, and the original idea is almost untraceable. And I like to view food in that same way as well. I also think not a lot of people put a lot of thought into how their food got in their plate. While that's one of the most important things I'd say. Recipes that are passed down hold more than just instructions, but they hold the history, and they tell a story for sure. It holds the history of someone learning how to prepare this dish, someone modifying it, and someone passing it down, showing that vulnerability by sharing it with others. For that same birria, it's where did my mom learn how to make that birria? Who taught her? What did she feel the first time she tried it? And who was she trying it with? What made her want to, in a sense, share it with us? And through that, are we sharing, maybe other people's summers? I just find it beautiful. And I do think it's important to change, or at least put more conscious thought into what we're ingesting rather than just eating. But yeah, like, what are you eating? How did it get to your plate? So food lets us do more than simply just eat. Sure, it holds nutrients, but like I mentioned, it holds the thoughts of others, the histories, and the culture of it as well. So through breaking bread, we are pretty much also reinforcing those bonds, not just with food itself, but could be social for eating with others. And I also do think it's important to change our landscape within those as well. Most of the time, I find myself eating just plain out of the blue, but it is really nice in those moments where I'm able to kind of reflect on what I am eating and how it got there and who I'm eating it with. And I'd also like to encourage you to do so as well.